Hello everybody, welcome to my brand new YouTube channel. This is DarkZany, and I've been meaning to do Let's Plays for quite a while, but I haven't really been able to get that thing started until today. So yes, now I'm doing it. I am going to start making Let's Plays. What really inspired me is recently I started watching some Let's Plays out there of Mordheim, City of the Damned. I have not been an early access player, so I just picked this game up quite recently. I have to say, the inspiration comes from the fact that I felt, after reading some of the reviews, that people tend to let's just say people tend to not enjoy games that have greater depth. People tend to say, oh, this game isn't fun because it's so hard, or they think it's stupid because the AI is bad, and I decided to make my own channel to begin, first of all, creating Let's Plays, hopefully of also of other games, but this is going to be my welcome to the channel video for my first Let's Play. I will be trying to complete the campaigns for all 4 of these bands. I'm going to start with the Skaven because that's the Warband that I've been playing the most with and failing the most at because I kind of enjoy these little Skaven rat dudes. I also wanted to begin with them because I feel after messing around with all 4 different warbands, that these Skaven are probably they probably suit me the best. I like these little ninja assassin type characters a little bit better than the other factions, although I have to say all the factions are pretty well balanced and fairly nice. And since this is my first video, I'm not gonna just jump right in and create my first Let's Play. That's gonna be the next video. This one is actually going to be a quick overview of my my take on each of the factions. I've already gone ahead and created 4 of these warbands, so 1 of each, and I'm going to be briefly going into each of these warbands and talking about them and sort of giving you a quick overview of what I believe are relevant points. So I'm going to begin with the humans. So the human mercenaries, well, okay, actually let's start with the game itself and sort of analyze what people have, what other reviews have gone and said about Mordheim, and also what my own views and where it differs. So I think the first thing to note, and I haven't played a tabletop game, so I wouldn't know what the tabletop is like, but first thing to note about Mordheim is actually fairly detailed and have quite a lot of depth. I believe it has the potential to be a cult classic, just as the game Mountain Blade Warbands, the second one. I think this game has huge potential to be just as challenging and engaging and have just as much replay value as Warbands. I also think that this game has great multiplayer value because of the extreme amount of depth that this game has currently. I didn't play the early access. I saw some of the footage of it, and it seemed like they've come quite far from the early access videos that I've seen. Like, the units look a little bit different, the way things move look a little bit different. Now, I think right from the start, I would like to go over each of the different factions and give you a general overview of the beginning of the game. Now, I already went ahead and hired the first mercenaries, your henchmen, your heroes, your leader, and filled out the first slots. This is still a rank 1 Warband, so not much progress has been made in this particular one. I've just tried out the human Warband and sort of saw what their potentials are and sort of mess around with different weapons and different builds and tried out how they feel. So right off the start, out of the 4 Warbands, the humans have the greatest advantage on ranged combat. They have this henchman called Marksman, right here. You can see here at the top left, Marksman. They tend now the melee versus the range debate. See, a lot of players, and I looked on the Reddit threads, a lot of players just say, okay, just put a ranged weapon on everything and it's OP. It's not quite true. There's a lot of penalties in this game for using ranged, and I'll go over that in more detail in a little bit. But needless to say, the human warband, they're called the mercenaries, they have the widest variety of ranged options, especially since if you look here in each unit in the description, the range, the weapon proficiency, they have a lot of different proficiencies, where if you go and look at units, say in the Skaven or in the I believe they're called the Sisterhood, they don't have much range options. So let's see. They also the humans also tend to rely heavily on the idea that you could be extremely flexible, and what I mean is, I mean, it's a Warhammer universe, and I think the human faction in Warhammer universe traditionally have been the sort of good at everything, but not exactly great at any particular one thing. But since they haven't really created any of the elf factions, like the High Elves or the Wood Elves, I'm fairly certain that out of the ones that currently exist, this faction currently stands out as the most ranged heavy faction. Now, but really, I think if they were to create all the different factions, the humans would be the most flexible, because outside of their ranged options, if you look at, for example, their leader, they have a wide range of options in terms of what armors they can use, like cloth, light, and heavy. Like the hero, the leader can use all 3. There's a bunch of melee weapons that he can use, and a good number of ranged weapons. So it's meant to be extremely flexible and possibly even hard to predict. I recommend. I think this faction is generally pretty beginner friendly, as well as in the hands of someone who's got more experience in this game. I think it could turn into something quite deadly if you knew how to exploit the weaknesses in this game, which I will get into later. But for now, suffice it to say, I think the ranged build is the best build for this. Sorry, my phone just went off. The best build for the humans, in particular, having 3 or more ranged guys is a great tactic, or is a great build, because it generally in I guess I'll go a little bit into the ranged versus melee debate. I will talk about it more in the next video when I actually start my first Let's Play with the Skavens. But basically, if you have one guy hitting someone from ranged, you have to consider 3 things. First of all, is whether or not it'll hit. And in this game, it penalizes a great deal. There's a lot of different ways to penalize and punish enemies for using ranged. Obviously, it has huge advantages if you position well and abuse terrain and be elevated. But in general, ranged is pretty useless in this game unless you have a lot of it. If you have, say, 3 or more, you can basically focus fire down an enemy pretty quickly, and then suddenly it's pretty OP because it's really hard to play against someone who just kills you before you can even reach them from range. Anyways, for now, oh, and also because it's because the humans are also have later on the ogre, and they also have a warlock. They don't suffer in any department. They definitely have their fair share of ranged melee magic. They can do everything, and so that's why they are the everything kind of faction. But yeah, let me go back to the main menu and show you another faction. So I guess in looking at this game, the first thing you want to talk about outside of the reviews and how much depth there is the understanding that this game has, oh my god, well, it definitely have really, really long loading screens. That's something that I think is very common for feedback, as far as feedback is concerned. Let's see, I will go into the Chaos faction. So, the game itself, the objective is to obviously complete the campaign, and the way to do that, there's three things you have to know. Is first of all, they have story missions, which is how you progress in the game. And then outside of that, every 10 or more days, and you can increase the days, every 10 or more days, you can get you get a request from the main faction that you're playing as. So for example, if you're into chaos, then the sort of chaos people will ask for a shipment. Now this is what happens in the Smuggler Spend. So what you're doing in this game is you're constantly sending out shipments of increasing amounts of word stones, which is this imaginary currency in this game that you have to loot on maps in order to obtain X amount, and the amount is up here shown. The value of it is shown by weight. So every 10 or so days you have to send a certain amount and send it through the Smuggler's Den in order to complete the request. And if you don't fulfill up to 4 of these requests, you will lose the game. So outside of that, another thing to note is this game is basically on hardcore mode constantly. Like, there's no easy mode on this game. It's totally hardcore mode from the start. And what I mean by that is, imagine playing like XCOM on classic mode with Iron Man settings. Like, you can't save scum. You can't save and then like mess up or make a mistake and say, oh shit, no, that didn't happen, I'm going back and I'm reloading the game back to where I saved previously. No, you can't save this game because this game automatically saves itself. Whatever you do is permanent. Everything that you make, every decision that you make in this game, you can't take back. So that means if you fight in this in a skirmish, or if you fight in a campaign and a unit suddenly gets injured by getting taken out, then that unit is permanently injured unless you treat it or whatever. And then sometimes there are these severe injuries that stay with the unit for the rest of the game. So you have to actually be really, really careful about not getting your units completely destroyed. And also because over a course of a game in a campaign, these sorry, I'm out of breath. Sorry. These little wounds, if you call it, they stack up, and there are penalties, and sometimes they're so bad that you just really want to just retire the unit and get another one, because it's sometimes not even worth keeping that unit around anymore. And if you lose like 1 or 2 unit, maybe you can recover from that, but usually if you lose like an expensive unit, such as your leader or hero during a combat, then and get like, you know, if they get injured, severely injured, and you have to replace them, that pretty much screws up your campaign, because first of all, they're expensive to hire. If you, for example, look, they're hiring costs, gold costs for each unit, and depending on what type of unit they are, like a leader is extremely expensive. It depending on what sort of type of unit it is, it's really expensive. And also, you rarely have the gold to get hired swords, which I'll go into later, because this is I just started this particular warband as well, so I don't actually have that unlocked. But basically, you get hired swords sometimes that are really ridiculously expensive in the gold, and usually can't hire them. So what happens is, if you start losing units and start getting your guys killed off, it's really incredibly hard to replace them. So this adds to the difficulty of the game, which for me is quite enjoyable because it adds to the challenge. Now, I can understand when newer players play this game, they could potentially find this very frustrating, because eventually, if you lose one or two fights and get some of your units killed, or have severe penalties to them, it's so hard to come back that you have to basically restart the campaign, and then people rage about it and write negative reviews on Rock Paper Shotgun. Yeah, basically, I read that review and I was like, dude, that guy was raging because he probably did horrible at the game. In any case, this is Chaos, and I would say, I mean, for those of you who are familiar with the tabletop series, or the Warhammer series, you'll know that Chaos has a bunch of mutations and sort of what they do and whatnot, and I won't go into too much detail for it now about that, but basically what you need to know about this faction is they are the faction that I would say have a higher amount or higher degree of risk reward than each of the other factions. They definitely are incredible in combat if you know what you're doing with them and do well with them. Obviously, that can be said for a lot of the other ones as well, but they tend to get some of these really unfair advantages. I would say almost broken advantages. But to compensate, they tend to also have huge drawbacks as well. Like, for example, their big unit, their impressive, have a passive that makes it disappear if it falls in combat. Like 20% of the time it'll just disappear and not come back. Like, it'll permadeath a lot easier than any of the other units because it's such a good unit to begin with. Like, it'll have all kinds of powerful abilities and stuff like that, but generally the flavor of this faction is huge risk and reward. Now, even on the smaller guys, like, say for example Dark Soul, you can look at the one of the perks is Last Stand. Always fights to the death. Prevents the use of flee and retreat actions. Immune to all alone. So it's like a positive and a negative. Like, immune to all alone. So all alone is a mechanic in this game where if your unit gets surrounded, but more, and you know, it's not just fighting 1v1 against something, but it's fighting like maybe 3 units or 2 units even. You'll have to roll a check called All Alone, and if you fail that check, you will likely not be able to do anything that round. Like, you'll lose all your offense points. I'll go into this in my actual first Let's Play. But generally, this is like a huge benefit because you're immune to it. Like, screw this, there's no weakness. But at the same time, you can't run away, so that means you have to basically, when you engage an enemy, unlike other warbands, where you can kind of disengage and run away if you think, oh shit, like they're surrounding me soon, I need to get out of the fight. Like, you can't do that with this faction. This faction is just like, I have all these advantages, but my disadvantage is I'm just gonna go and like kill you right now, or I'm gonna die, which I think makes this faction less beginner friendly, especially if you don't entirely know what you're doing. I mean, you could play decently with all the different factions just by grouping up and going all in, but I feel like once I show you a little bit more on the more in-depth tactics that this game is capable of producing, you'll see that this particular warband is extremely punishing to play as if you don't know what you're doing, and it just punishes your mistakes super hard. But if you do something correctly, this also rewards it pretty well. Like, for example, here's your leader, right? You're supposed to be like your biggest guy and the one that's worth the most. What's it called? Morale, right? It's worth the most morale, and I'll talk about morale in my first Let's Play. But this dude, he has an ability that, or he has a spell that's weapons of destruction. This is like the flavor of this entire faction, is that, you know, it gives you, for example, he casts a spell that says, or it has an he casts a spell that says melee attacks bypassed 10% armor absorption, which is like basically right here their armor value. It can bypass 10% of it, and then melee damage increases by 20%, and you can cast it on self or ally. Like, those are massively good benefits. Like, they're huge buffs, okay? But like, it also has a chance for this thing called Tzeentch Curse, which is your risk and reward thing. Like, that's the risk, because this is huge rewards. This is like, it's like basically a free buff that you can get every single time, and you can just cast it on like a bunch of your units and just go into combat with a huge buff, armor penetration and lots of damage. But if Tzeentch Curse triggers, you're going to lose this unit. Yeah, I've seen it happen. It does like 99999 damage to this particular unit who's casting it, and boom, he's gone. He's dead. He just gets knocked out, and it's like instantly he dies. I think Sisterhood also has something similar. It's called Holy Wrath. I am not entirely sure. I haven't seen it happen, so I won't. I don't want to be caught saying something completely stupid, but yeah. So this is like a risk reward faction. It definitely has some range options, such as the Brethren, but I would say that it's more of a spell casting faction and melee faction. Like, a bunch of these things will get mutations, like not just this unit, but a whole bunch of the units have mutations, and as they rank up, these mutations give huge benefits, like an extra arm, whatever, and then those in turn have even more benefits. So a unit could potentially randomly get pretty OP with the right mutations, and you have no way of controlling it. So that's also kind of the luck of the draw. But once you get the mutation, you can sort of build around that mutation and sort of maximize the effect of it. They have spellcasters, I think, later on, and the one other thing I want to point out about this faction, yes, this faction tends to, I don't know, like, I faced against this faction quite a bit, and they hit ridiculously hard. And I think one of the things that you have to look into for this faction and notice is that they can go through what is known as parry. Okay, so I'll briefly go over that, and then I'll move on to the other factions. So this faction is one of the only factions currently existing that can go through a stat called parry. Now, in each character, they have a stat called dodge and parry, and they also have things like melee resist and range resist. Okay, I will go over this all again. I will go over everything when I start the first Let's Play. This is sort of just an intro to the game and my channel. And as far as, or you know, if you haven't already can see, I'm very detail oriented about certain games, such as strategy games like this, and this is this being my first video game that I'm doing a Let's Play off, is going to be, and because this is a game that inspires me to do it, it's a very highly detailed game, and this is sort of my thing. I really enjoy this type of thing. So, what is the difference between dodge and parry? I did some research on this. I looked up the thing on, what's it called? I looked it up on Reddit, and in the game, dodge value is something that you'll always have on your characters, regardless of just whatever. Like, the only time that your dodge value goes down is if you wear armor that's not cloth. Like, cloth armor gives you plus 10, see right there, plus 10 dodge chance right here. And then the other two don't give you dodge chance, and the heavy armor actually reduces your dodge chance. I forget how much. I will look it up and I will tell you in a bit, in my first video. The parry is something that does something a little bit extra. It not only lets you prevent an attack, but if you are able, and I'll go over this in more detail in the first Let's Play, if you are able, and it has to do with your what is known as offense points, but if you are able, if you successfully parry an attack, you are able to counterattack. And counterattack is basically when someone tries to attack you and you parry or whatever, you can, if you're able, you can actually hit back, which is very important in some circumstances. But let's just say this faction is one of the only factions that specializes against this stat. So enemies can't parry chaos very well because there are mutations that can help against parry. Because this faction later on gets they get this equipment called Armband. I believe I can have it right now. Actually, let me see if I can get that. No. Well, there's an equipment that you can equip some of your guys with. It's called an armband or a bracelet or some shit. Yeah, armband right there. Armband. And that just negates parry. This doesn't sound like much to you in the beginning, but say you're a human faction, right? You go and you fight some dude, you hit him, and then he parries, he hits you back, and then you hit him, and then he hits you back. Like, it's a back and forth trade. But with armband or some sort of mutation benefit or some way of negating that, you don't, like, it doesn't matter if the enemy has like 100% parry chance, you negate it. You just say you can't parry me, and I will go right through your parry and keep hitting you. So what this means is basically free hits. You can go up to a guy and just keep hitting them, and they can't fight back. This sounds pretty scary already, right? They can still dodge, but let me go into sort of the difference between dodge, parry, and sort of the resistances. So in order to use dodge or parry, you have to actually get into a stance. It's called parry stance or dodge stance. And unless you get yourself into that stance, you can't use these stats. You don't actually dodge or parry anything. You still sometimes cause the enemy to miss, and that has nothing to do with your dodge and parry. That has everything to do with your melee and range resistances. So what this is basically your innate dodge chance against melee or ranged attacks if you're not dodging. So if you're already dodging, you will have both. Like, okay, say if a guy comes at you with an axe and he's trying to hit this guy named Bradley. If you're in dodge stance, you will have 40% chance of dodging his hit. If you do, great. But if you're not in dodge stance, and then you still have 14% chance of sort of dodging his, or mitigating his chance to hit. So how it works is if a guy swings an axe at you and he has 80% chance to hit you with that axe, if you're dodging, you're subtracting 40% away from him. So he's actually only got a 40% chance to hit you with his axe. If you're not dodging, the melee resistance is the one that actually enters the, I believe that's how it works, is the one that enters the equation, and instead of 80% to swing his axe and hit you, you can still dodge it by your melee, and the 14% goes against his 18 or 80, so 66% chance of hitting you. And that's a huge difference. So you can actually upgrade these stats, obviously, and I will be going over builds in my first Let's Play. But needless to say, overall, this faction hits hard, comes at you really strong. I would say out of all the factions, this faction has the highest potential for blitzing strategies, or going in and just going hard and taking someone out before they can react, because they have so many ways of doing that. If a fight drags on too much, I think this faction does have some issues with, especially with, like, if they get outnumbered or if they get surrounded, they can't really do much because they can't disengage and whatnot. And I'll show you once I do a Let's Play of this faction. But I think it's time to go into the next faction. So I was having a bit of fun when I created the Sisterhood. I think it's Sisters of Sigmar or something like that. Some people call them the Crazy Sisterhood, whatever. Basically, they're like a really religious group. I mean, the cult was, the one that I just showed you was also pretty religious, but this one also has a pretty religious bent to them. I named them Defenders of Virginity. Anyways, they, this faction, like, to be honest, because I play the Skaven so much, this faction is freaking scary, for two reasons. One, like, okay, they have, everything in this game has, like, advantages and disadvantages. This faction is freaking scary, when I play as the Skavens, because this faction, similar to the other faction that I show you, the Chaos faction, the demon worshippers, this faction can negate dodge, and a lot of my Skaven units rely on dodge. Now, if you go into it negates dodge, I think either with hammers or flails. I forget which. Let me double check. So critical hit chance. Okay, so it's probably flails. Yeah. No, that's not it. Okay, I will get back to you on that. But there are weapons that this particular faction uses that basically just say, oh, you can't dodge me. And it's really hard to... oh, it's kind of ironic because I'm actually using weapons that have a greater chance to be dodged. And that's something that I was actually testing out with this faction, but I'll go more into that a little bit later. Anyway, this faction is extremely good at melee. They have a whole bunch of options with melee weapons. They have their own factional weapon that's called Sigmarite Warhammer, and I'll go into that. But this faction is a melee faction because none of their units so far that I've seen have any ranged. A good particular thing to note is every faction has a unit called Impressives. So far I actually haven't shown you any because I haven't unlocked the Impressives in this game yet. But Impressives generally are your giant dudes that have some sort of drawback, but they're huge, they have huge HP pools, and they do crazy stuff. But this faction is so far the only faction that has an Impressive that is a small size or a regular size. It's not huge. It still has a huge HP pool, but this faction, it's basically another like lady dude person who has a large HP pool and does a lot of damage and whatnot. But the size is not a huge unit. It's it's like a regular size unit. That is a huge advantage because because like really large units, they have limitations on jumping up or climbing things or going inside buildings because the doorways are just not big enough for them. With this faction, their impressive is a regular sized person who can go through doors, who can go into buildings, who can climb walls and jump over things, or jump and do stuff that normal impressives can't. So that is, I would say, a huge advantage that they have over other factions in the impressives department. I believe they can also heal. I think it has to do with the Persona Dramatis. I will go over that in a little bit, but I think she has a spell that can heal you, and outside of that, yeah, they have no range. They have really good armor. They have all kinds of melee. They do have some holy spells. I will have to do some more research on my own to look up this faction. Like, I think out of all the factions, this is the one faction that I actually played the least. I didn't actually look at what their holy spells do or whatnot, but basically they hit hard. They come at you and they have lots and lots of options to melee you down, and they're scary. I would say this faction and the Chaos faction would both give you a run for the money for being able to melee the best, probably out of all the factions that are out. I'm thinking maybe once dwarves come out, it will probably take the cake for melee. I'm not sure, but so far this is like an all melee faction, and they have really heavy emphasis on just great damage, great defenses, and not much weaknesses. But yeah. Finally, I will show you my favorite faction, and then I'm going to end this video and create my video on the first Let's Play, the first episode, where I will actually start a new faction totally from scratch. I'll start with the Skavens. So this is actually a Warband that I made and played for a bit. I actually made, like, before the making of this video, I played a whole bunch. I played like all these factions different times, many different times. I also didn't. I played a whole bunch of Skaven, and I learned from my mistakes. And I have to say, this game has a huge learning curve. As you can see, I have not lost at all in this particular warband. I mean, I've only done like 11 days on this warband, but yeah, I'd say that's pretty decent for. But I only got to this point. I mean, in terms of being able to continuously and successfully maintain like a high success rate and not die or not lose from all my mistakes. And I am part of the reason why I want to do this Let's Play is to show people how to play better, or to not just play stupid and make jokes. I mean, I will entertain people obviously, but this is also my intention to show you all the mechanics that I did my research for and tried to learn, and point out things that you can do to improve on how to play this game so that you can actually get more enjoyment out of it. Because, I mean, sure, yeah, we play games to have fun, but I think part of that fun comes from winning and doing well. And I enjoy playing games that are a little bit more complicated with a lot more strategy involved, and this game definitely offers all of that. Now, that said, the Skavens are probably my favorite. I don't entirely know why. I think it just like naturally suits me best because I played all the different factions. Okay, I tried all of them, and the Skavens sort of fulfills a weird little niche where they're not exactly your go-to guys for being tanky or heavy melee. They're not really necessarily, like, they're really unexpected. Like, you don't, it's hard to describe. They're basically okay. The flavor. Let's start with the flavor. Their flavor is they're assassins. They can supposedly kill you really quickly. Now, I haven't been able to do that yet. I think I will be able to do that with some of my characters later on, once they're more leveled up, because you need some of your abilities to get that. There's quite a lot of combos in this game that exist, not just for Skavens, but for a lot of existing characters out there. But I'll go over that in my first Let's Play. But basically, the Skavens, they tend to have a sort of advantage when you're using stealth. And there's actually no stealth mechanic in this game, in the sense that you don't, it's not like World of Warcraft rogues, like you don't just actually physically disappear. Like you don't have that kind of stealth in this game. The kind of stealth that I'm talking about is like breaking line of sight and staying hidden, or using ambushes. I think this particular faction emphasizes that most, and it's very subtle. It's like this faction, along with Chaos, I think have the highest learning curve out of the existing faction. I think Humans and the Sisters of Sigmar, they're a little bit more beginner friendly. Like the Sisters of Sigmar, you can just run in with heavy armor and just go balls to the wall, and that's actually basically how you play them. The Humans, you can have a bunch of archers and just snipe people all day, and that's, I mean, there's more depth to it than that, but that's one of the things that you can do as a beginner and have a lot of fun doing that. But with Skavens and with Chaos, they punish you for your mistakes pretty heavily, because for one, the Skavens are actually pretty squishy. As expected, they're just rats that they actually can be picked off pretty easily. What you need to do is really abuse the heck out of terrain and really utilize stealth properly, and position. I mean, obviously every single faction would benefit from positioning, but I think the Skavens does it the best, because here's an example. The Night Runner is one of the heroes. I'll explain the differences between hero and leader in a bit, but basically this is one of these heroes, and if you look at his ability, fleet-footed. After a successful leap or jump down, movement range increases by 3 meters for 1 turn. The hell, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, what does this actually do? Does this even actually help me? Like, why is this supposed to be good? Why is it beneficial? And it took me a while to realize what this thing actually can be used for, and why is it so freaking insane. So like, if you have a map that, generally these maps get pretty big when you play this game, and as you progress, the maps just tend to get bigger and bigger, and you'll have more and more units to fill that map with. So, but generally, one of the things that you run into problems with is getting your units around. And what I mean is, like, obviously it's a no-brainer. If you have 5 guys hitting on like 2 enemies, then those 2 enemy guys are fucked, right? Like, you'll have an advantage. If you have an enemy that has 5 guys hitting your 2 guys, then your 2 guys are pretty fucked. That's generally how it works. However, with the Skaven, you can sort of abuse that in a weird little way, and that is in setting up traps. Especially when you play multiplayer against humans, they will likely see a small group of enemies, like a small group of your guys, and say, oh, there's only 2 of them there. I can just send all my guys and mob them. Which is generally true, or like they're available units within the area. They'll just like, okay, so I have 3 guys, there's 1 or 2 Skaven there. I'm gonna send my guys in and group around them and try to kill them. Now, what this ability does is it actually lets you have a dude, such as this Night Runner, be a flex unit or flexible unit that can move around the map and basically put out fires quickly, or like not literally fires, but like put out dangers quickly. So, for example, if one of your guys get caught off by like 3 enemy dudes, generally, if this dude is positioned somewhere like on top of like on a second floor or at a higher elevation, he can jump down, and for the rest of that turn, each movement will be increased by 3 meters. I'll explain that in more greater detail once I start playing the Skavens, but each movement point from the strategy point pool will actually have 3 additional meters, and that's huge. That's actually a huge increase. And you can basically blitz across the map super far distances and reach your guy and help him out before any enemy reinforcements can get there. And sometimes this can be used offensively, so like you can bait someone in and they'll attack you, and then boom, you blitz this guy over and surround the enemy, and before they know it, they thought they had the advantage, but before you know it, you turn the fight around and it's in your favor now because of this dude. This is basically what Skavens do the best, and this is just one of the guys. Like, a lot of what the Skaven can do involves different like mobility things, different like abusing things like okay, here's another thing. Like, every faction obviously does better when you surround an enemy and you have superior numbers. Like, that's obvious. But with the Skavens, they actually go for that even more hard. Like, they actually do that a lot better because of like their factional bonuses. So for example, Swarm is one of the major important ones. It's a passive skill that's every single Skaven can learn this. So when another ally is engaged with the same target, increase melee hit chance by 5% and melee critical hit chance by 5%. Not stackable. Okay. This is huge. Like, you have a group of guys and they all have Swarm on them, for example. Like, you can just hit them a lot easier and crit a lot easier and abuse that even more. Like, you get even a bigger benefit for using superior numbers and swarming someone than any other faction would, because you can actually, use certain skills like this to go for that. Let's see, what else do I want to say about Skavens? Okay, so I did remember saying something about telling you, the ranged. Skavens, they can use ranged weapons, and I've seen it used in multiplayer that did work pretty well. What I have to say about it is I do like the existence of range on Skavens. I don't think they're a pure melee faction, but I also don't think that they're a ranged faction either. They're not meant to go all out with Warplock pistols and just go blam blam. Like, you could try that build, and it would most likely be semi-decent, but when you're going against, like, Sisters of Sigmar, for example, that will just fail really hard. Because they'll just all charge you and get into melee range, get up in your face, and you'll have to switch weapons. And if you built your characters all gunner skill, then you're just screwed. So I wouldn't say Skavens are meant to do that. What I think Skavens are meant to do with their ranged weapons is, I would say it's a damage insurance. What I mean by that is, when your guys have, like, when they're low on HP, and this will happen a lot with Skavens, is when they get low on HP, what a lot of players do is they just keep fighting to the death and, whatever. But, and if you like playing that way, that's more power to you. Go do that. In fact, get Chaos, because Chaos does it anyways. But with Skavens, these weapons, they do decent damage on their own, and each have a unique advantage. Warplot Pistols does more damage and does a debuff. Shurikens, you can fire them a little bit more often, and you can reload a lot easier. In any case, I would put ranged as a damage insurance, because if you are ever low on HP, you can choose to disengage and back off just a little bit so that they can't melee range you, and let your other guys, keep them in melee range so they can't like run after your low health dude. But instead of being a useless low health dude that is at risk of being, knocked out, you can use that low health dude by switching weapons to a ranged weapon, and suddenly you're still doing damage with that dude. Like, he's not going to do a lot of damage because you're probably not, specializing him into range damage. You're probably not going to hit very often, because you actually do need some skills in range to increase the damage and hit chance. But even if you don't build range, if you use Warplot Pistols or Shuriken, it's going to be useful. Okay, it's going to do some damage, and he's not completely out of the fight. You can back him off and be relatively safe and use these weapons to do stuff. Whereas if you were, for example, using Sisters of Sigmar, they're all melee, right? So if one of your sisters get low on health, well, that's unfortunate. Like, she can't stay in the fight unless you're going to risk her going down. Like, you can't use her the same way you would use a Skaven warrior, where you can back the Skaven warrior off just a bit and then still throw shurikens at them. Like, that, I think, is the advantage that the Skavens have, that I haven't seen a lot of people use this and abuse this. Like, I gave every single one of my Skavens a shuriken for as much shurikens as I can. Like, they're pretty rare. You can't really get them that easily. Like, you'll have to actually loot enemy Skavens in this game to get more shurikens. Like, you can still buy it in the store, but they're pretty rare. Like, so, like, what I would say is, like, give a shuriken to every single Skaven. Don't try to go for ranged if you don't have to. Like, don't focus it, don't build stats into it, but when the situation calls for it, it really gives you that edge in the fight, because even your low health units can still stay in the fight, doing something, doing some good, doing some damage for your team, and it really goes a long way. And finally, because I've been playing the Skavens the most, I would say that an enjoyable I guess the quality about this faction that I've noticed is that the heroes are your squishy damage dealers, and your henchmen are generally the ones that tank the damage. And that is a combination that I like a lot more than, say, what the humans do, where the human mercenaries, you would have your archers be your henchmen, or your damage dealers be your henchmen, and then or at least for the beginning of the game, your hero and leader units would be the guys who are melee and tank the damage. I don't like that setup as much as I do with the Skaven, because if you view the game from sort of a game theory or economics standpoint, these hero units and leader units, they're extremely expensive, and they're pretty much irreplaceable. Like, yeah, you can theoretically go, I mean, it's possible to go and just hire another hero, but when you hire another fresh level 0 hero, you're gonna be put so far behind that you basically are better off just starting a new campaign at that point. Like, you don't want your hero to take any risks of going down in a fight. You really, really don't want that. You don't want your leader to go down. You don't want your heroes to go down. And by having your these guys, the warp guards, be the tanky dudes that you put in the front line. Let's see, where's my... What the hell? Oh, this is... I was trying to find the... There we go. By having these guys be the henchmen, be the ones that actually tank the damage and be the ones that have the heavy armor and go in initially and initiate fights, you're actually not risking your more expensive dudes. Like, if this guy dies, like, obviously I'll try to keep him alive and because, you know, he has more experience now, but hypothetically, if I lost myself a warp guard, I can go and replace him for 12 gold. Literally, just 12 gold. Or I can even buy a more experienced one because now I have the money for it. Look, 24 gold for a level 1 warp guard. Okay, that's basically what I have. Every single time that you... Like, you profit so hard with Skaven if you understand the economics behind it. Whereas, for example, in the human faction or the chaos risk reward faction, like, basically if you win with chaos or human, you win, great. But if you actually start to lose a fight or lose the upper hand, what you're losing is usually your hero, your leader, and they are hard to replace, and it's actually a much bigger risk. Whereas these guys, you're not risking that much when you're fighting with your front line being your henchmen. They're only like 20 something gold to replace for level 1, or the level 0 is like 12 gold, so it's super cheap to replace these units, and it's a lot easier once you get the hang of this game to use the Skavens and abuse the crap out of the mechanics, at least for me. That's sort of my... Because I play games with the mentality of, you know, keeping game theory / economics in mind, so that I'm still coming out ahead even if I'm, like, you know, falling behind in a fight. Like, I'm still gonna come out ahead on gold if in a lot of games. In this game, it's not so important to focus on that, but it's just an aspect that I really enjoy when playing the Skavens, which is their ability to mitigate any sort of losses. You can cut losses really easily with Skaven like it. And what's also funny is that your leader and hero units, they are your damage dealers, and they are squishy, but they also have a lot of really interesting ways to prevent that damage from ever occurring to them. And it's like I said with the Chaos faction, both the Chaos faction and the Skaven are designed around the idea that once you have really solid understanding of the game, you can abuse the mechanics a little bit harder than the other factions to really gain an upper hand. And with that, I will end this particular video, and I will see you guys next time, where I will actually begin my first Let's Play ever, which I'm super excited about. And it's going to be the Skaven, where I'm going to start a new campaign entirely from scratch, and I'll explain every single thing that I do, and explain every single mechanic and everything that I do in a way that, you know, even a completely new player can understand. But at the same time, we're going to also have some fun, because, you know, this is a Let's Play. This is, even if you don't get the game, like, sure, it might be a little bit boring to listen to all the mechanics of the game being explained to you, but I think once you see me in action, you'll see that it can be pretty fun when you actually have all these things in mind, because then you actually start winning, and winning is fun, right? So yeah, well, thank you guys for watching this intro video to my channel. Obviously, Mordheim is the first game that I'm gonna do a Let's Play on, but hopefully I might be able to do more in the future. I think the next game might be XCOM 2, but that's gonna come out, in February, so I have quite a bit of time to do Mordheim before then. But yeah, if you like what I've done so far, or if you have any comments, feel free to comment on the YouTube comments below, and subscribe if you would like, as well as like this video if you thought anything that I've done so far is of note. Or yeah, but thank you. This is DarkZany, and I hope to see you guys in my next video.